being in this realm and talking to other parents and caregivers of young people with cancer, and especially sarcoma, there's a big role of advocacy. And you're forced to dig in and learn things and advocate because doctors, oncologists don't even know about all these different sarcomas. There's so many different kinds. And in their practice, they may not have had, I mean, even a sarcoma specialist may not have come across all the different kinds of sarcoma. So it's a really different thing to navigate. I live in Vancouver, BC, Canada. My son has desmoplastic small round cell tumor, which is a very rare sarcoma. Probably maybe 1 in 4 million people get diagnosed with it. Seems like it's getting a bit more common, but it mostly hits young males between, oh, maybe the ages of 10 and 40, but it can 1 out of 10 cases are women. Some people can be older or younger, but it does tend to hit young men.
So what was life like before all of this happened?
Okay, so Josh was diagnosed when he was 33 years old, and he had just been married for 6 months. Up until then, he'd had a great life. He had a great childhood, did all the regular things everybody does, graduated from high school, went to university, college. Went and then trained as a dentist. So he went to grad school, trained as a dentist, started working in that field as an associate, and did that work when he was doing that work when he was diagnosed. So he maybe had about 6 years of work in his career and then got the shocking diagnosis.
And he's, as a dentist, he's pretty ingrained in the healthcare community. So this must have been a really big surprise, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. When he was first feeling some symptoms, he thought that maybe it was work related, sore shoulder, sore neck, or possibly an old sports injury. So he started off by seeking out physio, massage therapist, chiro, those sort of paraprofessionals. Had some different abdominal pain at one point, which he thought might have been um, um, appendicitis. Pain went away, so he thought, "No, I guess it's not." So that is an issue for young people with sarcomas, is that often by the time they're diagnosed, it's progressed quite far because they don't think of themselves as having cancer, and often the symptoms are, um, kind of maybe all over the body with the type of sarcoma that he has. He had a variety of symptoms, I wanna say, from, like, this neck and shoulder pain to abdominal pain. Um, he knew he had a gut feeling that something wasn't quite right. Um, but when you're a young person at 33 years old and you go in to see your family physician, primary care doctor and say, "Oh, I just feel like something's not quite right." I mean, they're not gonna send you for a CT scan or any kind of imaging right off the bat like that. So it took a while of him going back, to his primary care doctor over a few months before he got the diagnosis.
When you say a few months, roughly, if
I
you
wanna
remember how
say
long.
probably maybe 6 months? Yeah, 6 to 8 months, which kind of when we found out later, a lot of, oncologists working in this field they sort of corroborated that by saying, "Yeah, it's often about 8 months before they can make a diagnosis on this." So, awareness about this is really important. If they were able to have caught it earlier, it might have made a huge difference for him.
And for yourself, did you feel like something was wrong after he was trying all these different methods of trying to, like, relieve his symptoms? Did you have, like, this inkling of, like, I don't know, something seems really different about this?
I definitely did. I he just was really not feeling great, and kind of even mentally, I found a change in him. And I think it maybe because he was preoccupied with this pain that wasn't going away. Um, his brother is a doctor and his sister is a nurse, and we happened to all be away together a few weeks before he was diagnosed. And he was kind of fixated on how he was feeling and talking about having gone for blood work and sharing his blood work with us, saying that it was okay. You know, my mind started to go in all directions. I was started thinking, is he depressed? Is there some mental health thing happening? Is there something wrong in his personal life? Because he just did not seem himself. And I feel like maybe that was a lot to do with him just knowing there was something wrong in his body.
So then when was the moment that he found out it was sarcoma?
I want to say in February, he started to feel like something wasn't quite right and maybe went and saw physio. It, August, September, the pain was a bit more regular and he was, it was sporadic before that, I guess. He started to regularly go and get, chiro, physio treatments. Um, by October, yeah, I mean, he had an episode in August of this abdominal pain where he thought he would go to the ER because he didn't know if it was appendicitis. His brother said, "Yeah, maybe you should go," and then he didn't go, um, partly due to long wait times. So we thought, oh, and then it went away. But it was beginning of November that he went. Well, actually, um, he was away with a bunch of guy friends on a weekend, on a weekend trip, and one of his friends noticed that he was up in the night often to urinate and said, "I don't think that's common at our age. You better get that checked out." At which point, he went to his primary care physician the following week when he got back, and he did a physical exam and noticed there was some kind of mass in his abdomen. Immediately sent him for an ultrasound, which showed that there was some kind of, masses in his abdomen. And the next day he went for a CT scan, and that confirmed that there was definitely something. The ER doctor suspected it was, might be some kind of cancer, some tumors, and said, "You need a biopsy as soon as possible." So that was on, Thursday was primary care, Friday got the CT scan, got the biopsy on Monday, and then he got the diagnosis the following Friday. Um, he was lucky to get the diagnosis of desmoplastic small round cell tumor pretty quickly because there happens to be a pathologist where we live who developed a screening test or whatever it is for that sarcoma. Often with this type of sarcoma, it does take a while sometimes for patients to get the diagnosis. So everything moved very fast then. I mean, he basically started chemo as soon as he could. The treatments for many of these sarcomas are very old. Nothing has really changed in sarcoma treatment for many years. I want to say like 30 to 40 years. When we got this diagnosis right away, um, I knew that nobody's going to know anything about it. There's not going to be any funding for it. It's just going to be, it's not going to be great. And that has proved to be true. Um, Immediately, we just wish that it was a cancer that is more common, there's more research, there's more money, there's more study on. But when you get something that's rare, it's a whole nother challenge.
And then when you guys found out that it was sarcoma, specifically the word sarcoma, I'm sure y'all did your research on it and everything, but it doesn't even sound like a cancer at first.
Well, exactly. Like, when I heard the word sarcoma, I was like, "Okay, what is that? Is that cancer?" I didn't even know I didn't know what a sarcoma was, and everybody that we told, because of course everybody asked, "What does he have?" Thinking that they would recognize it, and I'm gonna say, "You're not gonna recognize it." And he has a sarcoma. Um, Nobody knows what a sarcoma is. I've had to explain to so many people, it is a type of cancer. And people don't know this. There's carcinomas and there's sarcomas, and they're both cancer, but they're different. People don't know this.
Did you change the way you told people because of that, or did you just default to explaining, okay, well, he has sarcoma and this is what sarcoma is?
Oh, I spend so much time educating people about it and explaining it to them. And they're like, "Oh, I never knew that." And um, kind of disbelieving, like really educated, smart people who are, you know, in very, professionals of all kinds don't have never heard of this. Um, they don't know what it is.
So then when he got diagnosed finally, what did treatment look like for him?
So he started on a treatment that they've been using for another sarcoma, Ewing sarcoma, because this type of sarcoma he has doesn't have its own unique treatment. They just piggyback off of treatment used for a similar sarcoma. So he went through 14 rounds of chemo. So kind of lasted from December to August. And we were told that, there was no cure, and that the prognosis for this sarcoma is 15% of people make it past 5 years. So, yeah, I mean, treatment, and luckily for him, he handled the treatment quite well and was able to get through all the cycles of it. Um, and then after that, he went on to another chemo, which was about another 6 months. So he's actually in total had probably 40 rounds of chemo. Um, he's never gone, too long without treatment. He's never gotten to a stage where he's been NED, no evidence of disease, or where there's been any break for him. Um, it's now like 2.5 years. We advocated pretty hard for him to have surgery and whole abdominal radiation, which is another type of it's a type of radiation, and that's another thing too, is you learn way more than you ever thought you would about different cancer treatments. He's had SBRT, which is one type of radiation, but he's also had whole abdominal radiation, which isn't that common, and, his body took a real hit with that, but we had to advocate for him to have surgery and this radiation. It wasn't automatic at first. The surgery was a 12-hour surgery, which also included chemo. Um, he did quite well coming through that surgery. The thing about this sarcoma, have you see analogy with people to help them to understand it? It's kind of like buttercup growing in your lawn. It sends out tentacles everywhere. It's all over the place. And you can try and kill it with chemo, but you've got to go in and try and get it all, but you can't get it all because the places where it is sometimes are really close to major organs and major veins and arteries. And so the doctors told us that, and the surgeons told us that. And, cancer surgeons always want to go in and take something out and get clear margins. Um, this isn't like that.
And then at the same time, he's also, in the middle of really the beginning of his career, especially as a dentist. So getting this kind of diagnosis and going through all of that treatment, I mean, like, how did he handle was he able to even have like a career during that time?
No, he hasn't been able to work, and that's the other thing that people don't realize is, with children, they're quite well looked after and they're supported by their parents. Older people often have established themselves financially, hopefully. Um, they don't get hit quite as hard, especially if much older seniors or whatever. But it's those people that are hit in the prime of their life, people in their early, their 20s and 30s, early 40s. Um, some of them have young families and they can't work. And if they don't have any um, disability insurance or, it's hard. So there is a great financial impact for, um, young adults hit with this. No, luckily for him, he had disability insurance, but that is not typical. There's lots of people in the community that I know of that have not had a hard time supporting themselves and they're not able to work.
And with his own support system, friend-wise, were there changes in that? Because I know, it's one thing to get cancer, it's another to get cancer at this age, and it's another thing to get a super rare cancer, very aggressive cancer at this age. So did you see, hear any differences in type of like relationships he had with people?
It's really hard when you're young too because everybody is, uh, people's lives are moving on. People are active, they're doing things with their, spouses, family. He's tried to do as much as he can, but, there's a certain element is where you're not really fitting in with your peer group so much. I mean, that would be the same for young children too. It's hard because physically you're just not able to do what your peers are doing, and especially as treatment continues and you start to feel more and more confident, you know. So from his point of view, I would say that, and I just feel like when a young person gets cancer, it really it has some kind of effect on the whole community. It really spreads far and wide. People are really struggle with it because especially um in our culture in North America, because we're used to, and especially generations now, maybe 100 or 200 years ago, it wasn't like this. But nowadays, you kind of expect that things can get fixed. They can be repaired. There's another way around it. There's always a fix for something. There's always uh, young people are brought up like that in our culture. So it's quite shocking when um, you're told also too that, if you work hard, that'll pay off. If you do your best, work hard at school, work hard at fitness, that'll pay off. Um, be um, financially responsible. There are all these things that young people are told. If you do all these things, life will be great. You just have to work hard. But um, this really upsets that dynamic quite a bit. And I don't know, I've thought about this quite a lot. Maybe a couple hundred years ago, people were kind of more used to the reality of life and death. We don't see it. We shelter people. We're really sheltered from it in our society. Illness, death, especially with young people. And partly that's modern medicine, which, we're grateful for, but it's it's a different reality.
Yeah, because I guess it subverts people's expectations of when, like, you're young. There's this expectation that there is gonna be something to, quote, unquote, "heal you," or you hear all the time that, "Oh, well, you're young, don't worry about it, just give it a little bit of time," and stuff like that, and, of course, when people hear about cancer, I generally, people don't tend to think that way, but they don't realize that when it does hit somebody young, and especially with sarcoma, that hits a lot of young people. And I'm talking like people who are getting ready for their careers, not children. It's not just being sick, it's completely shaking the foundation that you have built to become like self-sustaining adult.
Yeah. You know what? You couldn't have said it more um, succinctly. That's exactly it. Um, so it sort of shatters reality for not just Josh and family, but so many friends as well. It's really had like a big effect on the community. And then because of the rarity of it and the lack of research, that's a whole nother piece of it that can sometimes be frustrating and also kind of makes you feel a little bit angry. But it is the reality that the funding for research is not there for the rare diseases. And so we've been doing our best to do private fundraising, and we've done pretty well with that. And I've been also having to educate people about that too. I came to learn that basically there's three sources of funding for cancer research: government, industry, which is pharmaceuticals or pharma, et cetera, and maybe other companies, and then private donations. And for something like this, it's private donations which are going to have the biggest impact. Government funding's great, but from what I understand, it takes a long time to get it. And there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in it, and industry funding can sometimes be big and you know, uh, big and beautiful, I guess, but it can be pulled really quickly, um, depending on how things are going because they're looking at the bottom line, profits, etc. So it's private donations and, y you know, we're, you know, kind of it's grassroots. So
Well,
y
of course, and if not very many people are getting, you know, cancer X, because there's a lot of different types of rare cancers, and they actually make up rare cancers make up 25% of cancer diagnoses, which is really interesting. Like there's not a lot of investment in rare cancers like sarcoma because you think, well, there's not a lot of um, profit you can get from it if it does work versus other cancers that are a lot more common. And actually recently they actually just passed a law in the UK where I don't know the exact parameters of all of it, but it's basically a law that prevents it being that you can't like not invest in rare cancers simply because they were like rare cancers, so that we can actually get more research and we don't have to result to like these really old treatments like what Josh is was receiving.
yeah, um, and I think there is something in the US too, like orphan drugs. I'm not really familiar with, all the
It's
laws around it.
incentivization. It's like if you invest in because I looked it up because I was very curious. If you invest in rare cancers, you get some sort of tax break or a discount or something. I've got to look it up because I don't remember exactly, but it's not
Right.
the same. It's not like you have to do this, but there is something, and I think it's the Orphans Act. But I going back to his treatment, I'm so curious. Was there, can you think of like an anecdote that really encapsulates his experience going through treatment? Like, was there a moment he had where, I heard one patient was saying that she saw that her nails were falling off, and she was like, "Oh, I always thought the hair fell out, but then one day my nail just like came off." And that was a moment for her where she just felt she was falling apart. So I'm wondering, was there anything that he shared with you like that?
Well, I would say right now he's kind of going through like really the reality of his body failing him. is hitting him right in the face right now. Um, he is starting to feel like, yeah, he's a young man in the prime of his life. You want to feel productive, active, virile, strong, when you're 30, a 35-year-old man, which, that's how old he is now. Um, and he, he, yeah, he's feeling weak. He's feeling sore. He's in pain. He, he can't do things. So starting to hit, it's kind of affecting his mental health, starting to get depressed, right? Is there an anecdote? I mean, around Christmas time, he was taking a chemo that was gonna turn all his hair white, and he was kinda joking about it. He says, "I guess I'm gonna look like an old man, and I'm only 35." Um, I mean, yeah, the hair is all fallen out. It's grown back. He's got a huge scar down the center of his, chest from surgery, like, all kinds of things, and it's just like it's almost like going to battle. Like, he goes into battle and he comes out and there's, the wounds and sort of gets his energy together for the next battle. Um,
And then, like, I remember you were telling me a while back that men going through cancer, especially through sarcoma, uh, when you can't like work out and you can't feel like you're, this some men don't, go to the gym and try to get all buff and stuff, and that's fine. But I'm just saying, I think you described Josh was that type of person, and him not being able to do that probably really did something inside. Is that
yeah,
correct?
like, I think we have really maybe we focused more on women, like losing their hair and how, you know, that's that's a big deal for women, right? I mean, he lost his hair, but, lots of guys are bald, right? Um, but I think, it probably hits men in a different way, right? And I guess, um, seeing it, from the vantage point where I never really thought about how, um, it doesn't, you know, affect young men and how they see themselves and how they feel about their body.
Yeah. Like he's comfortable talking about it, or do you feel like that's a whole nother part of this?
Oh, I think that's a whole nother part of this. Yeah, I think it depends on the person. Some people may not talk about that. Uh, and then some people, that's the other thing too about cancer. Some people go on a podcast and some people talk about it and, share, and other people are private and want to stay private. So that has to be respected. And there's no right or wrong about that.
Right. So where is he? I know you were talking about his treatment journey. Where, if you're comfortable sharing, where's he now in his journey?
Um, so has just started a new chemo. He's had one round of that and is, expected to get more, but he's quite compromised right now. Um, and his counts haven't really come back the way the doctors would like them to. So they're treading carefully. Um, and we just hope that he can continue to get treatment. We haven't been told that he's not going to. So, um, yeah, it's kind of day by day right now.
Is it part of research, or is this just a standard of care
It's just part of the
treatment?
standard of care. He's not into any clinical trials. He's not part of that. Maybe he will in the future. We're actually going to be going next week to meet with his medical oncologist. will ask about that, but there's a lot of criteria too to participate in different clinical trials. So whether or not he would be eligible, we don't know. Um, People automatically assume that they can do those sort of things and travel, near and far to get whatever might work. But sometimes it's not possible because you might not be eligible.
Right. And so we've talked a bit about his experience. I'm curious, what's your experience been like? Like, for example, if you have a another parent come to you and they're talking about, oh, I think there might be something wrong with my kid, and I'm not saying they had cancer or sarcoma or something like that. Do you have a different perception of like what that comes across as? Because I'm not a mom myself. I hope to be someday, but I'm just thinking like, you worry about your kids and you want to make sure that they're healthy and everything. At some point you learn, okay, they'll be okay and all these kind of things. But then when you actually start talking to other parents and your own uh child is going through something that's like not just horrible, but it's not understood by most people. I'm just wondering, do you perceive those conversations differently now?
Yeah, I definitely feel like parents do worry about a lot of things to do with their kids, and a lot of time and energy they spend worrying about a lot of things that really are insignificant. Like going through this, I'm like, wow, it just has given me such a different perspective on what is worth worrying about and what is not. And people wasting their, time, effort, and energy, and actually probably causing their kids a lot of anxiety because they're worrying for nothing about things that don't really matter. I am kind of seeing the world like that right now. It's changing my parental worldview, I want to say. Um, when you're going through something difficult like this, you do notice how much people fixate or talk about or worry about little things that really don't matter. And um, I think people do that with their kids too. We hear about just in my work because I was a teacher and a school administrator. You hear a lot of talk about we have a sort of an anxiety epidemic out there. There's so many anxious kids nowadays, and it's kind of and I'm like, we're not doing kids any favors by just worrying about things that really don't matter.
There's that book called The Anxious Generation. Have you
Yeah,
heard of it? Yeah, I
yeah.
haven't I haven't read it, but my husband has. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Wow," let these kids just grow up freely and without a lot of stress and anxiety. Why are we putting all of these expectations, demands, and, you know, on them? Um, you come up to something like this is when you really need, energy and focus. If somebody came to me worried about, their child being maybe having something like this? I don't know. If they had a gut feeling that there was something really wrong, I would say to pursue it. I think once uh, being in this realm and talking to other parents and caregivers of young people with cancer, and especially sarcoma, there's a big role of advocacy. Like, you have to advocate, and you're almost forced to, even if you don't want to. And you're forced to dig in and learn things and advocate because doctors, oncologists don't even know about all these different sarcomas. There's so many different kinds. And in their practice, they may not have had, I mean, even a sarcoma specialist may not have come across all the different kinds of sarcoma. So it's a really different thing to navigate. And there needs to be networking. And I've said this to lots of people. There needs to be networking worldwide because there's so few numbers with a lot of these that you can't say, well, I live in this state, I live in the state of California and that's where I'm gonna talk to all the people that have had this sarcoma or whatever, you'll find people, but the numbers are low with rare disease like this. So it kind of forces you to collaborate and network um, internationally. I mean, for the sarcoma that Josh has, we have a group and it's just, there's no official organization or anything like that. It's just people using resources that are free out there, like, you know, Facebook or Zoom or whatever, to kind of bring each other together. I mean, thank goodness we have those tools to use because years ago you wouldn't have even had the ability, you know. And so we come together and, somebody might be in Czechoslovakia, another person in um, Australia, Canada, different places in the US, England. And it's, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things is that nobody cares what color somebody is, what background you come from, what country you live in. We're like, we all need to advocate and work together on this. Um, and, you hear about, treatments differ across different geographical or political lines, and it just seems like, wow, like, how how can that even be, But different things are funded in different countries. Just it's really interesting that I guess, um, it's really making me see that pushes you to go outside your own little world for sure.
And then, it seems like he's received at least, a certain amount of support considering he's been on, so many treatments and so on. But I am curious, as you've been through this journey and you kind of have this different perspective where you're watching it happen, especially as a parent. And I'm kind of wondering, as like for us like sarcoma researchers, is there something that I know there might be numerous things, but is there like one or two things that just makes you really like angry about the whole sarcoma process? And that could be research, that could be treatment, that could be support groups, anything.
I just feel like there needs to be networking and collaboration internationally. And that's very frustrating, and it's, like, mind-boggling, like, I mean, I've talked to people I live I'm in Canada, and I've talked to people in the US, and I'm like, "Don't just make this kind of a US thing." Like, the organization, it doesn't work for sarcoma because there's so few cases of the different ones. It needs to be international. So, if you just keep it at that, you know, it's not it doesn't quite work, right? So, I keep beating that drum and keep saying that. And, I've heard, well, there's different jurisdictions, there's different healthcare systems, right? You're
Hmm.
talking about a private healthcare system and then a public healthcare system, and they operate differently. When you have the disease or you're the caregiver or advocating for it, it's like, I can't be held back by that. I've heard that for the type of sarcoma that Josh has, there's some stuff going on in China right now, apparently. Well, how do we get more knowledge of that? How do we, you know, okay, so I don't know. Probably maybe they keep things, information there is not, I don't know, is it public? The doctors all know about it. I don't know how it all works. It's just like such a, so I think those, the political or geographical language, those things are challenging, right? And it's the same thing, like if somebody lives in a small rural community somewhere, they might not even have an oncologist in that community, let
They might even
alone
just get misdiagnosed completely because it's so rare. You really
rare.
need somebody who has like deep, deep expertise in this area.
Yeah. And they need a sarcoma specialist, and then they might need a sarcoma specialist that actually has worked with the type of sarcoma that they're diagnosed with. And then they want to seek that out. And then they're told, well, you're out of network. Sorry, the insurance system. Everybody needs to think a bit differently when it comes to this, whether it's health insurance or politicians or, you know, oncology organizations. Probably the oncologists, there's international oncology organizations that go beyond boundaries, but um, this, um, and even for the funding and the research, uh, same thing.
Overall, the parent, because it's a different situation than when you are the patient with sarcoma, or even different if you're like the sibling of someone with sarcoma. For, other parents out there who are having to go through this struggle of their child, going through like what Josh is going through, do you have any, I would say, two things. Do you have like a piece of advice to help them, and then a piece of advice of something not to do?
Um, well, I think that the piece of advice would be to seek a specialist in or a community of support. Find your community that of people that know, and because with these rare cancers, there's often like uh, caregivers and um, that know a lot, that know quite a bit. Like I've got a lot of information or know a couple people that know, because some of these patients are just researching it because they're forced to because and so probably no more than maybe with another type of cancer. I don't know, like if it was breast cancer or something, they just go to the oncologist, go to the breast cancer specialist, and you just know that they're going to tell you what you need to do next. It was something that's there, like sarcoma. Sometimes the doctors don't know. And sometimes there's um, people out there. So finding the expertise, whether it's physicians or just, you know, community of people that, have that information. I would say that as much as you need to advocate as a mom or a caregiver, unless it's a small child, it is the patient's journey, and we need to always remember that and respect that. So even for me, like what I might choose to do is different than what Josh might choose to do. And I've heard this with, partners too, like husbands and wives. I've heard, a patient say, like, my wife might want me to do this, but I don't want to do that. So I think it's important to not assume that the patient's always going to want want information. They want support for sure, right? But what does that look like?
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, and I think this is more literal than how it's usually said, it's their life. So you have to, you do have to respect that. And even if you have like a perspective from the outside, it's like you still can't really understand what it feels like for them on the inside.
No, that's so true. Like, I don't have the perspective to know what it's like to have a rare disease and a rare cancer and know that I might die. I can't. I mean, of course, I want Josh to live. He's my son. But I don't know what that feels like.
Yeah. So the last thing, it's kind of similar to my previous question, but like, is there anything you wish people would know?
Yep.
Um, Separate of like advice, support, and all that, little separate from the other question, but just what should people know about this?
Just people should know that hopefully people will get educated that to learn that sarcoma is a cancer. Um, there's many different types of it and that it affects young people. And I guess what I'd like to see is that become um, more mainstream, or like more people hearing the word sarcoma and knowing what it is and realizing that it's a thing and that it's rare and that it affects young people and that it's something that um, it needs its place just as much as all these other cancers that people know what pancreatic and lung cancer and breast cancer and prostate cancer is. Um, this needs to come up to that level,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Agree.
and especially because it affects young people.
Yeah, by a huge percentage, it affects a lot of young people. And again, I just want to like emphasize, like we're not talking like kids. I mean, there are kids who are affected by this, but like we're talking about, like with Josh's age, like that real, I call it like the career building age,
Yeah.
um, because it has such a different um journey than than some other people if you get it younger or older. So. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing the experience, and I hope Josh's new treatment is effective. I guess we'll see since he's only had one round.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for including me and being a part of your work.